The night he paid $2, the forest was holding its breath. Snow clung to the pines like ash, and the logging camp crouched in the clearing as if it knew it had no right to be there. Lantern light bled through the thin walls of the bunkhouse, spilling onto the mud where boots had carved the same tired paths for years. Eli Carter stood apart from the noise. He always did. Men laughed inside, loud and sharp, the kind of laughter that came from weeks of isolation and the kind of loneliness that turned cruel when it stayed unanswered. Cards slapped against tables. Bottles clinked. Someone shouted a joke that died halfway through, swallowed by smoke and drink. Eli didn't drink much anymore. Didn't play cards. He worked. He slept. He counted the days until winter broke and the trees would stop falling like men. That was when he saw the sack. It lay near the doorway, tied at the top with rope, still as a log waiting to be split. For a moment, he thought it was supplies. Then it moved. The men didn't look at it. Not really. They stepped around it, boots splashing, laughter unbroken. $2, someone said behind him. That's all she's worth. Anyone want her? The words hit harder than the cold. Eli turned. A man he barely recognized stood near the table, eyes glassy, mouth twisted into something that wasn't a smile. He gestured toward the sack like he was offering up spoiled meat. Eli's chest tightened. He had seen death. He had buried men crushed beneath falling timber. He had watched winter starve hope out of strong bodies. But this was different. This was the quiet violence of people deciding another human being was beneath notice. Where did you get her? Eli asked. The man shrugged. Found her wandering near the rail spur. Couldn't speak much. No papers. No place to go. The sack shifted again. A muffled breath. Eli didn't think about the money. He reached into his coat, pulled out 2 worn bills, and held them out. I'll take her, he said. The room went still for half a second. Then laughter burst out again, louder now. Suit yourself, Lumberjack. Eli didn't respond. He crouched and untied the rope with fingers that shook despite his effort to steady them. When the sack fell away, she didn't move at first. Then she lifted her head. Her hair was tangled, her face pale beneath layers of grime and fear. Dark eyes met his, alert, exhausted, waiting for the next command because that was what survival had taught her to do. She braced herself, shoulders tightening. Eli looked away, not in disgust, in respect. You're safe, he said quietly. I won't hurt you. The words sounded small against everything she had learned to expect. He offered her his coat. She stared at it like it might disappear if she reached too quickly. Finally, she wrapped it around herself, hands trembling. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated. Then, softly, Anya. Eli nodded, as if receiving something sacred. I'm Eli. He led her out into the cold, not touching her, not pulling her along. Snow began to fall again, slow and steady, covering footprints as fast as they were made. They walked in silence to his cabin at the edge of the camp, a narrow structure with a single window glowing faintly. Inside, the air smelled of pine and solitude. Eli lit the stove, poured water into a kettle, and stepped back. You can stay here tonight. Or longer. Nothing's expected of you. Anya sat on the edge of the chair, coat clutched tight. You paid, she said carefully. They said, I paid to stop it, he replied. Not to start something else. She studied him with the careful eyes of someone who had learned the cost of believing men. Finally, she nodded. That night, Eli lay awake listening to the wind scrape the walls and the quiet sound of her breathing. From the other side of the room, he understood, with a clarity that hurt, that the choice he'd made was only the beginning. $2 had bought him nothing, but it had given him a chance to be someone better. Morning arrived slowly, as if even the sun was uncertain whether it was welcome. Light crept through the narrow window and settled across the rough wooden floor. Eli woke before it reached his face. He always did. Years of logging trained his body to rise before warmth, before comfort, before anything that felt like mercy. He stayed still for a moment, listening. The stove had burned down to embers. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. Then he heard her breathing. Soft, even, still there. Relief moved through him, unexpected and heavy. He sat up carefully, making sure not to startle her. Anya slept curled on the far side of the room, wrapped in his coat, her dark hair spilling across the pillow he hadn't used in years. She looked smaller in sleep, younger, like someone the world had not yet finished breaking. Eli stood, poured water, set it to heat. The ordinary motions grounded him, gave his hands something honest to do. When she woke, it was sudden. Her eyes opened and found him instantly, sharp with reflex. For a moment, fear flashed across her face, then confusion. Then memory. She sat up quickly. I can leave, she said at once. Eli shook his head. You don't have to. Not today. Not ever, if you don't want to. She watched him closely, as if weighing whether the words were real. He placed a cup of warm water on the table and stepped back again, keeping the space between them untouched. I'll be gone most of the day, he said. Work in the north cut. There's food here, wood, blankets. This place is yours while I'm gone. Anya's fingers tightened around the edge of the coat. Why? She asked. The question was simple. The answer was not. Eli considered the truth before speaking. Because I know what it's like to be alone where no one sees you as human. That was all he said. When he left, the cabin felt larger than it had any right to be. Anya moved slowly, testing the space, the quiet, the idea that no one was watching her every breath. She washed her face with cold water, flinching at her own reflection until she remembered she was not required to look away. Outside, the forest stood tall and indifferent. Trees didn't care who you were. They fell the same way for every man. That thought steadied her. Eli worked with an edge he hadn't felt in years. His mind drifted back to the camp, to the sack on the floor, to the way the men had left. He knew how rumors would spread, how questions would follow. He knew some would assume the worst. He also knew he didn't care. At dusk, he returned to find smoke rising from the chimney. Anya stood at the stove, awkward but determined, stirring a pot with careful focus. She looked up when he entered, a question in her eyes. Permission, maybe. You didn't have to, he said. I wanted to, she replied. It feels good to choose. They ate together in quiet. The silence was no longer sharp. It rested between them like a shared understanding neither rushed to name. Days passed, then weeks. Anya learned the rhythms of the forest. Learned how to split kindling, how to read the weather, how to walk through the camp without shrinking herself. Men stared, some whispered, a few sneered. Eli never explained. One afternoon, a foreman stopped him near the trucks. You planning to keep her? The man asked, tone edged with judgment. Eli met his gaze evenly. I'm planning to let her live. That was the end of it. At night, Anya told pieces of her story. Not all at once, never in order. She spoke of borders crossed in silence, of names lost, of how hunger taught her when to stop hoping. Eli listened without interruption, without trying to fix what could not be fixed. Trust grew the way trees did, slow, unseen, undeniable. One evening, as snow began to fall again, Anya stood at the window and said, almost to herself, I thought my life ended when they put me in that sack. Eli stepped beside her, careful not to crowd. It didn't, he said. It changed direction. She turned to him then, eyes steady. So did yours. He felt that truth settle deep in his bones. They stood together, watching snow erase the world beyond the glass, two lives no longer defined by the worst night they had survived. And somewhere between the falling flakes and the quiet warmth of the cabin, something stronger than fear began to take root. The past did not release them easily. It came in small, cutting ways at first. In looks that lingered too long. In voices that lowered when Anya walked by. In the way some men spoke to Eli now, measuring him not by his work, but by the woman who stood beside him. Winter tightened its grip. Snow piled high. The camp grew restless. Isolation has a way of sharpening old cruelty, and one night, it found its courage in drink. Eli returned late from the northern cut to find a lantern burning outside his cabin. Two men stood near the door. Anya was inside. Something ancient and cold settled in his chest. She's supposed to be back where she came from, one of them said, voice loose with whiskey. You don't buy something like that and pretend it's not yours. Eli didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for anything but truth. She's not something, he said. And I didn't buy her. I stopped you. The men laughed, but it rang hollow. They weren't laughing at him. They were laughing because they were afraid of what his refusal meant. Inside, Anya heard everything. She stood very still, hands pressed flat against the table, listening to the words that had once defined her being spoken again, only this time, they didn't land the same way. Because someone was standing between her and the world, not to own her, but to make it stop. The men left when they realized there would be no spectacle. Cruelty hates witnesses. That night, Anya spoke with a steadiness that surprised even her. I won't hide, she said. Not anymore. Eli nodded. Then neither will I. Spring came late, but it came. The forest softened. The snow retreated. Life pushed through places that had looked dead for months. Anya began working openly at the camp kitchen, then helping with records, translating letters for men who had families they couldn't reach on their own. Slowly, quietly, she became necessary, not because she was taken, but because she was capable. Eli watched her change, not into someone new, but into who she had always been beneath the fear. Strong, observant, unafraid to meet the world's eyes. One evening, as the sun dropped low and the trees cast long shadows, Anya spoke the words that had been waiting between them. "You gave me back my name," she said. "You never asked me to give you anything in return." Eli looked at her, really looked at her, and felt the weight of how much she had already given, without obligation, without debt. "I didn't save you," he said quietly. "You saved yourself. I just didn't get in the way." She smiled then, not because the past was gone, but because it no longer owned her. Years later, people would tell the story wrong. They would say a lonely lumberjack bought a woman for $2. They would miss the truth entirely. The truth was this: for $2, a man was given power. And instead of using it, he laid it down. And in that choice, quiet, unseen by most, 2 lives were changed forever. If this story stayed with you, if you believe dignity is the greatest form of love, then subscribe, like, and share to keep these stories.